I Hate the News is a weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's May 27th, 2025. The one big beautiful bill is going to have much bigger impacts, but it also includes structural changes to federal employee rights. Will Jardiance and Farxiga, the two diabetes drugs that soak prescription budgets, soon cost less in Maryland? A new law sets up a mechanism to do this. On the other hand, the state is fixing to charge for viewing land records. In Frederick County, a fake mooning incident at a school board meeting. We have the audio, which may be more incendiary than the video. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program, where you'll learn to shape public policy, impact communities, and function at the center of modern society. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Arlington-based experimental music composer and producer Pierre Bernasconi. There is a lot of AI music in this genre today, but not here, where Bernasconi used a Minilogue, Cobalt 8X, and LTD guitar with Focusrite, as well as the software Reaper DAW and many FX pedals. You can find his music on SoundCloud and YouTube. The one big beautiful bill might cut Medicaid payments, make tips and overtime tax-free, but hidden inside are some structural changes to federal employee rights. Chris Jennison is a federal employment lawyer.
You have a filing fee that's contemplated for the Merit Systems Protection Board. You have changes to retirement. And so to just break those down for a second. So the filing fee for the Merit Systems Protection Board, currently when a federal employee is disciplined, is given a suspension more than 14 days or a proposed removal or a proposed demotion, they can appeal that to the MSPB, and there is no filing fee associated with that. There are jurisdictional standards. They have to have a certain level of jurisdiction, meaning they have to show that their case is properly before the MSPB, but they don't have to actually pay a fee associated with that too. We don't know what the fee would be yet. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act says there should be a fee, but it doesn't say what the fee should be. So that is concerning. And I think that could cause some due process issues for federal employees. They may not have the right to actually be heard anymore if they don't want to pay the fee, and it could be a sizable fee. We just don't know at this point. So that's the filing fees. On the retirement structural changes, there's some contemplation of what's called the high three, which is your high 3 years of salary in your earning in your career in the federal government factors into your pension. So the highest three salaries you have made in any 3 given years would factor into your pension. One of the changes that has been contemplated in this One Big Beautiful Bill Act is changing it to high 5. So it's going to lower the amount of money that is being factored into pensions. To me, the biggest possible change is that there could be a mechanism where new federal employees could opt into at-will status. So they're giving up the job protections like we just talked about with the MSPB. They're giving up notice, they're giving up appeal rights. But in exchange for that, they have a lower pension contribution. It's somebody giving up job protection rights in exchange for not having to pay as much money to your own pension. But that, in my mind, almost creates a caste system in the federal government. You have employees that have the due process and have to pay more to have that due process and be heard. And we have employees that don't have that due process, but they have more take-home pay. I just frankly don't know how that functionally is going to work. There's not a lot of literature out there to really explain the thinking behind this. And of course, given how fast this went through, there's not a lot of legislative history associated with this either. But yeah, I think that's kind of what this is. It is kind of you are paying for the right to be heard at a point later on down the line if you need to be heard.
What does this do to collective bargaining?
I actually don't know. I haven't looked at that. And part of that is we don't know all the nuts and bolts, right? We don't know what's going to make it from the House side into the Senate side. There's a tax on collective bargaining anyways, especially given some of the executive orders that have gone on. And you and your listeners may be aware of the executive order that basically invalidated large sections of the federal government from being able to be part of bargaining units, to be part of unions. So there are attacks on the Federal Labor Relations Statute anyways. I'm sure that this could be hand in hand with some of those attacks. I just don't know the nuts and bolts yet on that.
Chris Jennison, thank you.
Thank you.
Maryland has a new law that allows the state Prescription Drug Affordability Board to consider one method of controlling drug costs at the state level. The law sponsor, State Delegate Bonnie Cullison, and Vinnie DeMarco of Maryland Healthcare for All, a statewide advocacy group, explain.
Our Prescription Drug Affordability Board, which was established in 2019, and it was established in 2019 as only affecting state and local governments. And over the last 5 years, that board has been developing the processes by which it evaluates different drugs for affordability overall. And then what we did in 2025 was to say that their work could extend to the commercial market. The charge of the board is to determine whether or not a drug presents an affordability challenge for Marylanders, and if so, what are the options to constrain those costs? The one that you will hear most often about, but it is not the only option, is called an upper payment limit. That is not a price cap. It is simply what we as a state, or in the case of a commercial payer, will pay for that drug.
President Trump just signed an executive order trying to control drug prices. How is your effort similar or different from his?
What President Trump did is pretty much hot air. It does not put caps on drugs, drug prices, or drug costs. It exhorts drug corporations to do that, to charge the same as other countries. It says maybe someday we'll do regulations. It is hot air. The Inflation Reduction Act signed by President Biden is real action. That is making high-cost drugs more affordable for Medicare, and it's in place and working and doing that. The Prescription Drug Affordability Board of Maryland and the other states that have it is also real action. This year, this board will put upper payment limits on what state and local governments pay for high-cost drugs, a couple of them, and that will save taxpayers millions of dollars.
Isn't the prescription drugs bought by county employees a matter of insurance?
Insurance companies, their role in the cost is to find the lowest cost possible for a particular drug so that their premiums are not affected by the high cost of drugs. It happens that in the last decade or so, we've gone from 17% of every premium dollar going towards pharmaceutical drugs to 33% going towards pharmaceutical drugs.
Is it the fact that because of this law, the insurance companies are able to get even lower prices such that the premiums for Anne Arundel or Montgomery County employees does not go up? Is that the mechanism?
That is the mechanism, exactly. So, one of the things that we get asked often in this is, does it affect what happens at the pharmacy counter? Doesn't necessarily affect what happens at the pharmacy counter itself. For example, during the hearing on this bill, one of the delegates said, I only pay $10 for that drug. And I said, you pay $10, but your insurance company pays $22,000 for that drug for one dose. I'm not exaggerating. That is the case for the particular drug that I targeted to look at. So that $22,000 is going towards premium cost. And in the case of the Anne Arundel County is paying, in their negotiations and their coverage, they're paying $22,000 for that drug.
Two drugs that the board is focused on, Jardiance and Farxiga, are two diabetes drugs that are really budget busters for local and state governments. So we are hoping that sometime this year, the board will set upper payment limits on what state and local governments pay for those drugs. As of next year, allow the board to do the same thing for all Marylanders.
What is the mechanism the board will use to determine which drugs to target and which not to target?
Well, they're looking at utilization, and they're looking at what the cost it is to produce. They're looking at the cost to research.
So they know how much it is to produce? That's amazing.
In many cases, they do. Not all, but in many cases, they do. They ask pharma.
Can they force pharma to make sure that what they submit is accurate?
No, they can't.
So it is based on sort of self-reporting.
Yes.
The interesting thing about Jardiance and Farxiga is they were also drugs that Medicare negotiated with the drug corporations based on the Inflation Reduction Act. So we know how much Medicare will now pay, which is substantially less than they were paying. When they go beyond state and local governments, they will be looking at effect on insurers and effect on individuals.
But how are they going to look at it? Are the insurance companies going to come and say, hey, look, this particular drug is really pushing the premium, or that particular, is that the reporting system?
They have asked for information from state and local governments, which they received, and insurers. They are getting information from all our sources. Plus, we have been helping our coalition, Healthcare for All, because we have forums across state where people have told their stories of how high-cost drugs are hurting them. That's information the board's considering also.
Is there a law that asks insurance companies to accurately report this information?
Yes, insurance companies are actually regulated by the state.
Okay.
We know how much insurance companies are paying.
Can you explain the difference between how upper payment limits work versus price caps?
An upper payment limit is equivalent to if you go to the store and you see two kinds of eggs and you say, I only have $6 to spend on a dozen eggs, so I'm buying this brand, as opposed to a price cap, which says to the egg manufacturer, you can only charge that much for that dozen eggs. Now, you can choose not to sell in Maryland. There is that issue, right? You can say, okay, I can't sell it for that price. But what I believe and what we believe as a Maryland General Assembly is that there are 6 million Marylanders and most drug companies want to be in our market. Number two, it is actually illegal to advertise a product that you will not sell in a state. And therefore, I turn on my television, I'm going to see a commercial for Farxiga every 10 minutes. The Washington metro market, advertising market, is huge. So that would mean that they would have to take every one of those Farxiga commercials out of this market, should they decide not to sell Farxiga in Maryland, because we say, hey, we can only afford $10,000 per dose, not whatever we're paying now.
2017, the Maryland General Assembly passed a law that said if the generic drug corporations price gouge and increase their prices dramatically, then the Attorney General could go after them. That law was declared unconstitutional as violating something called the Dormant Commerce Clause, because I think it was a wrong decision, but that was the decision of the Court of Appeals, saying that the state couldn't affect the price that these people charge. So that's part of the reason why this doesn't affect the price. It affects what, as Bonnie says, what we pay. So it's not the price of the drug, it's what Marylanders pay for.
The egg analogy that you made, the analogy that I would make is I would walk into a store and look at a product and go, it costs $5 and I have 4. And I go up to the manager and go, will you sell it for 4? Some of these products, drugs in particular, don't have replacements. They are not various price points for various things. So it's not the same. I don't know if that analogy holds.
In some cases, the drugs don't have alternatives. And that is one of the factors that the board is looking at. They will make that consideration. But again, that's what you just described is a negotiation, right?
But do we do that? I mean, I do it when I am in another country, but I almost never, ever do that in America.
This is just not requiring you as an individual to do it, but this board is saying you are not paying more than this reasonable amount, because other countries do it all the time.
What should we expect? How much savings would there be?
We'll know when the board issues its regulations on Jardiance and Farxiga, which we think they will do. Nothing's definite, but it's what we think will happen.
Do you think that pharmaceutical companies would see this process and self-regulate a little bit? Or do you think you have to increase the ambit of the Prescription Drug Affordability Board, make it much larger, give it a bigger secretariat to be able to do like 30 drugs?
Well, I hope ultimately that happens. However, I will tell you that we're already seeing evidence of pharmaceutical companies making some changes. For example, insulin is a great example. I mean, the cost of insulin, over the last 10 years, in the last 6, since we have been promulgating boards across the country, the cost of insulin has dramatically decreased, like from $600 per dose to like $20 per dose.
Let me just talk about the impact on the drug corporations. One of the things that's going to have an impact on them when other states follow Maryland's lead. 3 states so far, Colorado, Minnesota, and Washington, have created prescription drug affordability boards based on our model of 2019 with the full authority. None of them have implemented yet. They're about to. I think what our board does this year, especially with this new authority, will make this start happening all around the country. Nearby Virginia, right next door, their legislature twice passed prescription drug affordability board legislation, and twice Governor Youngkin vetoed it. We're hoping that the new governor next year will sign it. And we hope that after Maryland announces how much savings are coming from these upper payment limits, it will spread all around the country, and that will have an impact on pharma.
Vinnie DeMarco, Bonnie Cullison, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the flip side, the state is looking at a new fee, 20 cents a page for viewing and printing land records. Longtime title lawyer Sean Goldfaden and Maryland State Bar Association's Shauli Sarkar say this will increase closing and insurance costs, among other effects.
I remember going back when I was a law clerk and walking down to the courthouse, and I'd have to do a physical chain of the title. We'd have to go back to these giant library books that look like something out of the Game of Thrones. God forbid the courthouse burns down, because then no one at that point was able to recreate these deed chains. There was a need to migrate everything into a computerized, centralized system. That morphed into this Maryland Land Rec system. The stakeholders, like the Maryland Title Association, the Bar Association, et cetera, we all agreed that, in order for us to pay for this migration and this new system, deeds were getting recorded for $20, which and instruments were getting recorded for $20 back in those days, which is dirt cheap. So we agreed as part of the industry to charge what was called a surcharge at the time. It started off as $5, and then now it's automatically up to $40. So every time you record an instrument in Maryland, you got to pay an extra $40. It's basically $60, except for a couple of exemptions for powers of attorney and plats and things of that nature. So anyway, that $40 surcharge was supposed to go to this Land Record Improvement Fund, which is supposed to help maintain the system, hire employees, keep the technology up to date, keep it safe. For the longest time, that money was building up in a fund, and it was being used by the clerks and by the archives to help maintain the system. In 2010, the legislature saw that this fund was growing. Sometimes it would be 20 million, sometimes it would be 40 million. It would depend on how hot the housing market was. Well, the legislature got the smart idea to say, wait a minute, we're putting all this money into basically a money market account and it's earning interest. So we're going to sweep all that interest into the general fund. And that became like a $5-6 million interest build that would go into the general fund every year. And now all of a sudden, because we have this budgetary crisis in Maryland, they decided they needed to take all the money out of the Land Record Improvement Fund and then take that into the general fund to offset some of these deficits.
How much money?
It fluctuates every year. I think some years it could be 20 million, some years it could be a little higher than that. So we're talking about a substantial amount of money.
So all the collections from the surcharge is now going into the general fund instead of the land record fund?
Correct. The statute says that they were supposed to advise two stakeholders, the Maryland Land Title Association, which I am the former president of, and also the Maryland State Bar Association Real Property Section. We have a delegate in our committee that actually represents the Real Property Section for the State Bar that meets with them every year. So last year, I, as president of the Maryland Title Association, received an email saying, hey, we're going to do this new, sexy version of Maryland Land Rec. We're going to call it 5.0, and we need some guinea pigs to help test it out. So, of course, I was like, that's great. We have a bunch of members at the Land Title Association that I'm sure would love to participate because they want to be, the first on board to learn it. It makes them more experienced. It makes them, to better serve their clients, et cetera. So I gave them the names of about a dozen people. Never once did they tell me that there was going to be a charge per fee, per page, per view, in the following year.
What is that charge now?
So it's 20 cents per view per page. It's going to cost you $1.60 just to view your own deed, basically, online.
Now, view and print are different.
No, it's the same.
What is the consequence of this new fee for you?
Maryland is like the 5th costliest state in the union for title expenses and closing costs and transfer taxes. I mean, on the average transaction, let's just say it's a $300,000, property or house. What we've estimated is it could cost another $200 per transaction per person to transfer their property or to refinance, even if they just wanted to refinance.
If I can add in, I think it also affects a lot of other types of legal issues. So if you're facing bankruptcy, if you're in a family case, you're looking at your assets, if you have tax issues, tax compliance, these are all cases where you're going to need to access these records. And so Sean's given an example of, in his industry, he's at a firm, it has a national presence. We're also representing attorneys that are solo practices or small firms. Even if they were able to access this, they have subscription tiers. The highest subscription tier per month is $1,500 per month, and that's to access just over 22,500 pages a month. Now, we've talked to several of our solo and small firm attorneys. They regularly exceed that amount. So it's not like that's the cap, because if you reach that amount, you're then asked to pay 20 cents per page again to view or print. So that's just a baseline of potentially $18,000 per year that a solo attorney is going to have to then pay out. And then ultimately, where's that cost going to go? It's going to go to the client.
This also applies to me if I want to do any land record search, right?
Yes. Now, Archives has stated that you can still access it for free at the clerk's office or if you go to Annapolis, but that really is taking a step backwards. And for many people who have a transportation issue, they're going to spend more just getting over there, than they are to actually access the record. For pro bono clients, people that are seeking legal services, they're often asked to just obtain these documents before meeting with a pro bono attorney. So if they don't even have a way to get that information for free, a public record that they've probably filed, or someone related to them has filed, that's really an access to justice and a barrier issue for them to get legal services.
What would you say to people who say, well, closing costs are $15,000 on a $300,000 home? What's $200 there?
We're already one of the costliest states for closing costs, and we want to encourage making it easier for people to buy a home and not having these restrictions. And as he mentioned, this is a fee that every individual, every professional is going to pay, and you're not going to have access to that information after 30 days. So the costs are just going to add up and add up.
So just to be sure, right now it's free.
Right now you can access it online, and they've just updated the site to indicate that starting May 30th or sometime thereafter, there will be this new fee.
This is a double taxation because we're already paying for it. So if they wanted to get creative, we thought about potentially charging, out-of-state subscribers a little bit more than in-state subscribers.
Seems like you are a collateral of the state's budget crisis. Do you plan to sue the state?
Right now, just from the MSBA perspective, what we're trying to do right now is to find an immediate solution so that we're not paying that fee. We are hopeful to connect with the governor's office, archives, and other elected officials to find a solution. And then further down the road, I think we just have to see where this goes.
Charlie Sarkar, Sean Goldfaden, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sean Porter came to Frederick County, Maryland Board of Education to protest. Like many other school districts, Frederick BOE has become the venue for political battles over pronoun use and transgender rights. The district has a policy going back to 2019 that requires students, teachers, and staff to use the preferred names and pronouns of students, allows for chosen gender use of restrooms, and in school sports. But in January this year, newly elected conservative board member Colt Black said, "Just as you might have a right to be you, we have our right to be free from you." The situation has been tense since. The school district received several Title IX gender discrimination complaints about Colt Black's comments, and the other members of the board authorized an independent investigation which found Black had not violated Title IX. The board is now thinking about changing its old policy on pronoun use. Sean Porter jumped into this battle. If you have young children nearby, you might want to lower the volume or remove them. The language is adult.
All right. Good evening, lefty cocksuckers, carpet munchers. I'm here to talk about Policy 443 and how you motherfuckers wasted $25,000 on attorney's fees to go after a newly elected board member for citing case law. So the statement was something like this: you have a right, you're free to be you, and we have a right to be free from you. And basically what it means is you can't compel speech. This is not Nazi Germany. You can't make people use they, them pronouns. You can't make me do a motherfucking thing. I dare you to try and make me do anything at all. I don't think you got enough security to make me do anything. I'll just leave it at that. It's real simple. I'm not going to use they, them pronouns, and you can't make me. You can't make him. You can't make any one of us. Boys go in one bathroom, girls go in another bathroom. That's the way it's always been. And to spend $25,000 when she doesn't get the resources she needs for her kids because you want to attack one of the few conservative politicians left in Frederick County using taxpayer dollars to attack your political enemies to clear the field for you for the next election cycle is pathetic. But it's what despots like you do. So anyway, I'm going to artistically express my extreme childish displeasure with you. Basically, if you're going to do something stupid and childish like Policy 443 and go after Colt Black, I'm going to do something really stupid and childish too to respond, protected by the First Amendment.
Porter then proceeded to drop trow to Moon school board members and the school superintendent. Turns out he didn't go full Monty. And for all his bravado, only showed off his gray underwear. No charges are being filed. Apparently, Maryland does not prohibit backside exhibition, only frontals. I will verify the law on this and get back to you. There are also questions whether Porter is actually a Frederick County resident. The Frederick News Post reports that he splits his time between Frederick and Washington counties, where he has also pulled off similar stunts at government meetings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities of Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Arlington-based experimental music composer and producer Pierre Bernasconi. You can find his music on SoundCloud and YouTube.